what it would take for you to slow down, or what would it look like for you to slow down in your sex life. And maybe it's not even just around being in the bedroom about to have sex. Maybe it's about the way you flirt with your partner or the way you touch your partner outside of sex. Welcome to What I Love About Sex, where some incredible guests and I, Steph Kanowski, will be bringing you the tools for improving your sex life with topics such as sex issues with your partner, sexual self-confidence, premature ejaculation, sexual shame, masturbation, sharing your fetishes, orgasmic pleasure, and more. Sex is still so taboo, and I personally believe that by improving our understanding and communication skills around sex, we can enhance our own self-pleasure as well as deepening our long-term romantic relationships. So listen in, try to stay open-minded, and let's get started. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode on the What I Love About Sex podcast. Today's episode is about allowing yourself to embrace the touchy-feely stuff during sex, or before sex, I should say. There was a piece of Michael Castleman's work Michael Castleman, his main message is, His main message is to stop imitating the rushed porn sex that we all see, right? And instead do the opposite. Like, be more in the moment, go slower, don't rush, embrace pleasure, make the goal pleasure. You know, so many of us make the goal orgasm, and I have to make sure that she's totally pleased. Like, feel pleasure and give pleasure, and make that the goal of your sexual experience. And a piece of his work, I'll quote it right now, is some men become impatient with the touchy-feely stuff and simply want to plunge into intercourse, possibly fearing that the woman will change her mind. Big mistake. Imposing intercourse on an ambivalent lover is a prescription for lousy sex. She won't feel aroused and won't be responsive. She'll think you're a jerk. Her vagina won't be wet and receptive, and you won't slide in easily. She'll feel pain rather than pleasure. But some creative caresses usually prevent all of these problems. End quote. So think about that, and think about in your own personal sex life how often you rush based on the insecurity of, all right, like let's, we gotta do this right. We gotta get to it. Don't waste time. Show her what a man I am. Put on a performance. Whether you're in a relationship or you're dating or you're just having casual sex with partners, pay attention to how often you do this, how often you strive to be in that rushed pace because the way you watch porn and you see, hey, these guys who are great at sex with big dicks do it this way. Therefore, I have to do it that way because these women just look like they're having the time of their lives. No, there's actually a lot of, and I forget where this was, but they did a study. They were interviewing porn stars, and the women were saying how nice it feels to go back home to their partners and have more sensual, slow sex, because that's the sex they really love. So it's really important to understand how that touchy-feely stuff really creates more of an emotional bond with your partner, for you and for her. And women especially, are more able to be connected through the emotion before sex occurs because they have more of a responsive desire, right? So like the context is very important for women, where men are more easily able to turn on. And context doesn't have to play such a huge role in their arousal. So when I say touchy-feely stuff, what the fuck do I mean? I mean caressing her slowly, right? Giving her a massage, touching different parts of her body, licking her inner thighs, stroking her hair, maybe tugging on her hair, And doing these things before you get into actual penetration is important because it allows her to get to the point of arousal. It allows her to get wet, to be responsive. There are times for quickies. Of course, we all love a good fast quickie, but most women take time to become aroused. Okay, so with that time, you need to fill that gap of time, which is going to make her the most connected to you, right? You have to think of it that way. Like, what are you doing to really fill that emotional connection? Because yes, sex in itself can be emotional. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's literally just someone just feels like they're being penetrated or they're penetrating and there's no fulfillment after it. You know, I've spoken with and worked with guys who just felt like, you know, it's not fulfilling. I'm not like, I don't feel like I'm getting my needs met and I don't know why. It's just sex, but why don't I feel fulfilled? I thought that's what I wanted. And a lot of it has to do with this connection in other ways, where you're making eye contact with your partner and you're having moments where you can laugh and you know, play and feel like you can really trust each other. And if these things, if like desire and trust and play and pleasure are missing from your relationship, then when you have sex, like, don't expect penetration to fix all these things. You know, I think a lot of people do. They just expect, well, if we have sex a bunch of times a week, that means we're good in our relationship, right? No. I knew someone who had sex daily and they had a terrible relationship. So you want to think about that. You want to think like, how often am I trying to rush versus be there with my partner and experience the time with them. Enjoy the time. Enjoy the pleasure. Because that's really the best part, right? That's the build-up. That's the build-up to the intercourse. So think about that. Ask yourself how you can be, what it would take for you to slow down, or what would it look like for you to slow down in your sex life. And maybe it's not even just around being in the bedroom about to have sex. Maybe it's about the way you flirt with your partner or the way you touch your partner outside of sex. What I mentioned in my last Saturday Sex Tips email, and if you're not subscribed, you can subscribe in the link in the description below. But what I mentioned was the importance of creating intimate physical contact with your partner with no sexual expectations attached. And guys underestimate how powerful this is for women, because often women feel sexually used when they have sex with you and you're not touching them any other time. Like, the only time you really touch them and embrace them and are showing intimacy towards them is when you want something sexually or when you're having sex. And that's what throws a lot of women off. Women will get really resentful around that because they'll try to go back to how things were, because some guys, how things were, meaning like more of the honeymoon phase when you touched each other and it didn't always have to lead to sex. You liked to be around each other. You liked to physically hold each other. There was that desire there. So a lot of women will, in their mind, feel like, all right, well, I'm not going to have sex. Like, he needs to touch me more. Like, he needs to build that emotional connection more. I need to feel that. It's not really like he needs to do this, he needs to do that, but it's like, I'm not feeling emotionally connected. So how can I just go right to sex? So pay attention to that too. Like outside of sex, how often are you initiating touch without expecting intercourse? Because that's another way to implement touch and to create tease and create some pleasure and enjoyment and loving interaction. And that's important. Because we don't want our partner to feel used. And this can go both ways. And I always say this can go both ways. But I'm speaking to you guys. So I speak to you based on what you can control or what you can be aware of as a man. So that's why I always speak like what you guys can be doing, But it's not necessarily that you have to do anything. You don't have to. You could do what you want. Oh my God, the emails today. But I want you to be aware. I want you to think right now and at least be aware of it, because awareness is always the first step. Of like, all right, well, how much of a emotional connection am I really intentionally building? Like, in what ways am I intentionally trying to build emotional connection? Forget the sexual connection for a second. How often am I intentionally trying to build emotional connection with my partner? Because if your answer to that is, holy shit, not at all, like I can't think of anything, then that probably has a direct correlation to your sex life. The frequency and the satisfaction behind it. But it's just a good question to ask yourself, And then the next question would be, okay, well, what can I do to create more intimacy? And this whole podcast is about more touch, right? And touch during sex or before, right before, even during, just to slow down the moment and really embrace it and really soak it in and seek the pleasure around it. And ways outside of the bedroom are just creating intimate moments that may lead to sex if you're both turned on and it's the right time, but maybe they don't, and that's okay. And that's still very important to do, even when it doesn't lead to sex. All right, guys. So I hope this helped you. Don't forget to leave this podcast a rating and review on Spotify or iTunes. I appreciate you guys so much for listening. Have an amazing morning, evening, or night, wherever you are in the world. Talk to you soon. I hope this episode helped you. If it did, I would love for you to leave me an iTunes review. It would mean the world to me. You can also screenshot your favorite episodes and tag me on Instagram @StephGanowski. And before I go, remember, your sex life is as good as you make it out to be. Until next time.